So you may be wondering why we start with silence. Well, we start with silence because I think when we look to the future, we need to take some time to think, listen, and collect our thoughts. We need to observe. I think there is so much out there that's coming our way, and we need a moment to gather our thoughts and know where we want to go. I've been thinking hard about this speech. I've been thinking, what can we say that experts in these rooms have not already said, thought, written about, published? And I think there is a lot. I mean, we know what the debate is about. There is a lot of parameters that are out there. Speed of change, digitalisation, artificial intelligence, robots, rate of change, jobs changing, new business models, new learning outcomes. We have a lot of new jargon that's coming around us. But not just this. And as we heard also in the clear words of Themis before, we have questions of social pressure, inequality, people on the moves, new lifestyles, climate change, new inclusion needs. All of this is there, we know. But against this background, we have the challenge of making sure that we realize the potential of each person, of each citizen, of each student, of each trainer in our countries. So I suggest that before we start, we take a couple of steps back and we think about how managing transition is also all about who we are and what we want to get. Nelson Mandela said, no country can develop unless its citizens are educated. This is a starting point that I think will help us move forward. So taking 2 steps back, let's first think about our vantage point. What corner of the world are we observing and what direction we want to move in? In this room, we have many vantage points. Some of us are here wondering how education can deliver the best results in terms of jobs. Some others, maybe, are here thinking about how training can combine excellence with inclusion. Others, again, are from the business sector, and they're thinking, well, how can I find the best employees, the best workers for developing my business? We have different vantage points. We need to recognize that. But we also have different identities, and we have many different identities in the room. And these will also color the perspective of what we look at. I can think of myself as Cesare Onestini, a man, a public servant, almost 30 years of work and career. But also I can think of myself thinking about the future and think about, well, what do I expect for my son? What kind of skills will he need as he moves into his life? And I can think of myself as a policy shaper helping some of you in the partner countries to think about the future and what kind of advice can we give as ETF. So these identities are there, and you in the room here around. We have teachers, we have trainers, we have policymakers, we have employers, students, parents, grandparents, daughters, sons, and all of you are many of these things. We each look at the global trends and how they will shape our future through these different lenses. Our vision is colored by fears, by emotions. Some of them are anxious about this. Some of them are maybe more optimistic. We heard from the rector of the Polytechnic a more optimistic note about the future could develop. And all of this, it's important to be recognized at the beginning because this shapes the hopes and aspirations that we bring to this common reflection. So I invite you to just take a few seconds to think about this, to think about what Skills for the Future means to you from where you stand, what is important in your professional role, what is important maybe if you were to give advice to a friend or to a family member, what is important for you personally, what are you thinking that you will need as you move on to the next stages of your career and life. Make a mental note of this and take out your phone, you're allowed. Take out your phone now, open the app, and don't go to your social media, go to the app of the conference, and I would like you to do a very simple thing, and we'll come back to that later. We'd like you to type in the app 3 words which relate to your expectations about this conference. 3 words that will then put together, and at the end of my talk, we look at it together. We look at it on the screen to see what are the words that you are thinking about as you prepare for the discussion in the next couple of days. Let me give you an example. Me, as director of ETF, I'm here mainly as a policy shaper in the development field. I'm interested in understanding what are the policy lessons that can inspire us in shaping the next generation of skills development. So my words would be understanding, shaping, and inspiring. Dan, I see you with your phones. You're allowed to have a quick peek at your social media if you want. And then now we're ready to start, and then we'll come back to this at the end. So now that we thought about what we expect, our different types of expectations, who we are, let's confront some of the trends. And some of the speakers before have already helped us trying to map some of these. In preparing for this conference, we in ETF with some partners have spent the best part of a year gathering analysis and evidence. We will be diving deep into all of these in the coming sessions. But I just thought it was a good moment now to give you an impression of these through some slides. Let's look together at these keywords that we hear and we see all around us. Digitalisation, numbers of users going up, billions of mobile phone users. Looking at the world, we know that distribution of these is quite skewed. We know that we, in Europe and in the neighborhood, we are at the upper end of some of these, but that Asia and some other parties moving even farther ahead. Automation. Here you have some starking numbers about how fast the existing technologies are moving. We have 50% of tasks being automated already. 6 out of 10 occupations have over 30% of tasks that could be automated already, and we know that the process is fast. Artificial intelligence affecting many different areas of the economy and of our daily life more and more. Some of us talk to our machines already, and the machine talk back already. Global trends, global trade, as we also saw at the beginning, shaping a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the challenges that we meet then in the skills arenas. And behind it, we had a very stark reminder of how population is also changing, of how we in Europe and also in the neighborhood are knowing demographic trends which will affect quite deeply the way in which we will be able to shape our societies. Societies where migration and movement of people internally and across border is becoming more and more part of our public policy and discourse, where the border between immigration and emigration countries has been blurred, and where we have to recognize that also from the education and skills sides, this requires new changes, and all of us are already very much involved in it. But also a world where migrants are becoming more and more important contributors to their home economies. And we see some starking figures here. But the question is, what do we do with this evidence? You know, the evidence is there. When we talk about global trends, it's not so much about what is going to happen, it's about what do we do about it? How do we interpret this data, and how do we change the way in which we, in our professional roles, shape policies and perform education and training? Let's unpack some of these challenges. The mega trend that drives a lot of this is indeed globalization. And in recent decades, we have experienced a great unbundling and worldwide dispersion of productive activities. We have witnessed deindustrialization, reindustrialization. We have witnessed its differentiation between North and South. And we have seen this together with a big transfer of wealth and technology and know-how as well as jobs. Most of your countries here in the room have become destinations also for direct investment from the European industry, for manufacturing, and more also for services. This means that we need to think strategically about countries and how countries can develop skills to attract foreign investment or to continue adding to these value chains. But also about how skills need to diversify to move up the value chain so that there is a joint win-win situation. But countries cannot only rely on global value chains. And I think that's an important message of this conference to drive growth. We also need to think about how skills can add value to traditional activities like agriculture, construction, crafts, rural tourism. We'll be discussing this in the course of the conference, and it is true that there is a digital component, but it's also true that we need to also look at the essence of these more traditional areas of work as a spring of development for many of our countries and of our regions, building on historical, linguistic, and cultural strength. As we saw, digitalisation is here to stay, is growing, is shaping many of our options. Already, many activities are extensively digitalized, and we will move from using machines to do tasks to working alongside machines in most of our works. All of us are already doing that in many ways, but this will be more and more the trend as we move forward. Digital technology opens also new horizons and opportunity. It bridges distance. We know this. It connects people. But I think we also need to look as professionals of this field at the opportunities for education and training. And the European Commission there has been doing some work. We have been working with partner countries. But digital technology enables us to reach wider and different audiences. We can deliver quality training in a way that was not possible before, and in many ways the world becomes our classroom. This means that we need to get good digital skills at the beginning, and we need to start education on digital with the education professionals. Movement, we have seen movement. Business moves, digital technology moves, people move. We have seen some numbers about migration. But we are all moving. I've been moving all my career. I've been growing up in Italy, studying in the UK, working in Belgium, the US, India. It is, in fact, the first time that I am back as an adult in my own country. I'm one of the circular migrants now, all of a sudden. So we are all moving. And we continue. It will be part of the future, and we need to look at how we manage this movement, and also in the education and training area, how these movements can bring benefits and can support the policies that we develop in our countries. Skill development systems need to be open to the world. We said, how do we do this? We need to give the best chance of success wherever people choose to go and wherever they choose to bring their skills. In order to enable this, we need to work, as we do in many of your countries, we need to work on recognition, we need to work on ways in which the skills acquired can be used and can be increased in terms of portability. So now I come to the last part of these few remarks, thinking, well, what does it mean in practice? We know the trends. We know that there are many things there that we need to do. Recently, I was in a school, and after I talked a bit, one of the young people said, well, we seem to know what the challenge is, we seem to know what the solutions are, so when are we going to implement change in our schools, in our training systems? What are we waiting for? And that's the question for us. The question is, how do we bring this now into the classroom and into the learning? We know that we need to focus on adaptability. We need to focus on the capacity to change job, change profession, reinvent oneself as you move through careers. This means strong basic skills, transversal competence. It means equipping people with these skills and rethinking education from preschool up. And we heard some great words from Themis just before. The European Union, as we heard, has focused on the concept of key competencies, and our friends in partner countries have heard us talk about this already for a number of years. But as machines become more capable of learning and working, employers will be looking for the very thing that makes us humans: empathy, creativity, critical thinking, communication, and working together. So as we look at these competencies, I think this essence of being human is what we also need to bear in mind. And people need to be entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurial not because all of us will be setting up business. Well, some of us will, and some of us will be very successful. But because everybody will have to navigate. We'll have to choose, we'll have to see where they're going in terms of careers and in terms of marketing the skills and the skills portfolio that they acquire through their formal education and through their informal experiences. Not many countries get this right, by the way. Not here in Europe and not also in the rest of the world. Also, orientation, how to help especially young people, but also older workers to find and reinvent themselves. The question of orientation and professional orientation is also another area where not many countries get it right. So we are here really to learn together and trying to see how we can come up with some ideas. How do we make this happen? I think the key word, we heard it I think before, is partnership. Partnership amongst the different kind of actors that are present here, that are working in your countries. We need to put people first. We need to focus on students and learners. We need to focus on teachers and trainers. We need to focus on families and communities. But we also need to look at employers and trade unions. And we need to look at all the players that can shape the policy. And I think I want to underline governments still have an important role to play. Public policy does not happen without governments. We might not like governments. We might all like to be a bit anarchic. But governments have an important role, and they have an important task. And usually, often when I go to meetings and ask about solutions, those solutions go in many directions. And I say, what about government? Oh, the government. But without governments, none of this will happen. So let's also remember how we bring in the government into the discussion. Partners need to be effective, and they need data. They need efficient data. You'll have in the experience pathway also a couple of examples of how data can be looked at. Data in ETF does a lot of this data collection and analysis. We need data not just as academics do to write a new paper. We need data to also give policy advice that has to be implemented. And I think this question of the quality of data is also one we want to discuss with you in the days to come. I will come to the end now, but I don't want to say, how do we think outside the box? How do we move outside the box? Well, we need a spark. We need to bring a spark to this mix of elements, and I hope this conference will help us find the sparks that will trigger this development. Before I conclude, I want to bring you a couple of good news, which I think are important. First of all, there is nothing inevitable about global trends. We are bombarded by all this talk about automation. Now there is a new word I've learned, automation anxiety. We become anxious about automation. Well, there is nothing inevitable about it. But it will be inevitable if we are not going to act in terms of shaping the future now. And as you know, as educators, it takes a generation. So we really need to work now if we want to get there. Many of us are trying our best. I think we need to up our game. We will have here the opportunity to speak to many innovators. In the next couple of days, we will have many examples to borrow from, to criticize, to critique, and then I hope we'll go home richer, and we, ETF, will have a lot more on our agenda. Second piece of good news, education, automation and digitalization do not mean standardization. And I think this is important as we go into the next sessions to remember that if we choose, automation and digitalization offer the opportunity to strengthen diversity and to build on our identities. Diversity is indeed a strength if we build on it. But to build on this, we also need to think again outside the box, to think with confidence and serenity about the future. So at the beginning of the talk, I asked you to look a bit into yourself, to think about what kind of words popped into your head, to look at the future. And now I'd like to see if the magic has worked, and you can see the words that you have been typing into the app, to see whether we share a sort of agenda. And here we go, and I discover it with you. Well, the big word is inspiration, but I see many other words that should guide our thinking. I see children, I see technology, but I see innovation, change, inclusive, cooperation, network, leadership, and then at the end we'll have to put this all together and see where we go. Our aim is really to open opportunities for all, to harness the talents, energize our citizens, empower people to take ownership of their lives, realize their potential, celebrate diversity, and make us all future happy, skilled citizens. Thank you very much.